Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, I want to start with a bit of a visual.
Okay, let's hear it.
I want you to picture a man walking into a room, and the very first thing you notice about him, well, before he even opens his mouth or before you know anything about his brain, is that he has to literally duck to get through the doorway.
Right, because he was just a massive guy, a literal giant.
Exactly. 6 feet 8 inches tall. That's 2.03 meters for anyone using the metric system.
Just a towering figure.
Yeah. And usually, when you see someone that size, your brain automatically goes to the NBA.
Yeah.
You don't usually think Harvard Business School professor.
No, you think center forward, right? Not academic theorist.
But today, we are diving into a man who is a giant in, honestly, both of those senses. We are unpacking the life and the mind of Clayton Christensen.
Such an important figure.
Really is. I mean, if you spent even 5 minutes in the business world or working in tech or even just reading the news over the last 20 years, you definitely know his vocabulary. You know the words he gave us.
For sure. You hear disruption or disruptive innovation all the time.
The buzzwords. To end all buzzwords. I feel like disruption is thrown around so much now that it can be anything from like, my Uber is running late, to just a new flavor of potato chip.
And that drove him absolutely crazy. It really did.
That's
Because
good.
Clayton Christensen was a very precise thinker. He wasn't some tech hype man. He was a rigorous academic and a deeply religious man and a former CEO who was trying to solve a very specific puzzle.
Right.
And when people use disruption to just mean change or chaos or just something cool and new, it totally diluted the actual warning he was trying to give people.
So that is our mission today. We are going to reclaim that word.
I love that.
Yeah, we're going to look at our source stack, which today includes his biography, his major publication history, and basically the collected records and summaries of his life and career.
A lot of really rich material there.
So much.
Mm-hmm.
And we're using all of that to move beyond the business jargon and understand what the innovator's dilemma actually is.
Yeah.
Because it's not just a standard business theory.
No, it's really a theory about why successful people and incredibly successful companies fail. And the crazy part is they fail precisely because they are doing everything exactly right.
Right. That is the whole crux of it, is the tragedy of good management.
Exactly.
But we're also going to look at the man himself. Because his actual life story is, honestly, is not at all what I expected when we started researching this.
It really takes some wild turns.
Right. We've got back-to-back basketball championships at Oxford. We've got a stint in the White House.
Yeah.
A missionary gap year in Korea, and this really heartbreaking battle with his own mortality that eventually turned his whole analytical lens onto the human soul.
Right. His book, How Will You Measure Your Life?
Exactly. So let's just jump right into it. Let's go all the way back to the beginning. Before he was the disruption guy, he was just a very tall kid growing up in Utah.
In Rose Park, specifically.
Which is a neighborhood in Salt Lake City, right?
Yeah, he was born there on April 6th, 1952. Clayton Megleby Christensen.
And Rose Park wasn't just, a random dot on the map for him. It seems like it really shaped him.
Oh, it definitely stuck with him. It was a very working class, very humble neighborhood. And he was the second of 8 children.
8 kids, man.
Yeah.
That has to be a loud house.
A very loud, incredibly busy house. His parents, Robert and Verda May, they ran a tight ship, but a very loving one. And you're totally right about Rose Park sticking with him.
Yeah, because it's later on.
Decades later, when he's this world-famous guru and he starts his own venture capital and investment firm, he doesn't name it Christensen Capital or Disruption Ventures.
He names it Rose Park Advisors.
Exactly. He really wanted to remember exactly where he came from.
I love that so much. It just grounds him. So, okay, he's growing up in Salt Lake. He's hitting that 6'8" mark, and naturally he picks up a basketball.
Right. He was a very serious athlete. He went to West High School, where he was actually the student body president, but on the court, he was just a total force.
A leader everywhere.
Yeah, and this sets up a pattern we are going to see again and again with him. He wasn't just the jock, and he wasn't just the nerd. He was always both.
Right.
He always insisted on inhabiting these different worlds simultaneously.
Which perfectly brings us to 1970, high school graduation, and really the first massive decision of his life, the whole college application process.
And this is where we really get the first clear glimpse of his character, because he applies to the big guns, Harvard,
Right.
Yale,
Right.
and Brigham Young University, BYU.
Okay, let's stop there for a second. Because if you are this ambitious, brilliant kid in 1970 and you get a fat acceptance envelope from Harvard and from Yale,
You go.
right, you just go. That is the golden ticket. That's the established path to the Senate or Wall Street or the Supreme Court.
Conventionally, yeah, it's a total no-brainer. But you have to understand, Christensen was a very devout member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
His faith wasn't just a background thing for him.
Not at all. It was the operating system of his entire life.
So how does a guy like that decide? I mean, does he make a pros and cons spreadsheet?
He might have made a spreadsheet knowing him, but the final decision was, to use his own words, a matter of prayer.
Wow.
He prayed about it, and he felt this distinct, clear impression that he needed to go to BYU.
Even though it's, Harvard.
Now, to be fair, BYU did offer him a full scholarship, the Kimball Scholarship, which certainly didn't hurt.
Oh, nice.
But he turned down the Ivy League because he genuinely felt a spiritual mandate to be in Provo, Utah.
And looking back at the sources, it's not like he suffered intellectually for it. I was looking at who was sitting in his freshman economics class, and it's actually kind of insane.
Oh, it's a literal who's who of modern American leadership.
Yeah.
You have Clayton Christensen in one seat.
Huh?
In another seat, you have Mitt Romney, who obviously would go on to run for president of the United States.
Right.
And in yet another seat, you have Kimby Clark,
Who later became the actual dean of Harvard Business School.
Exactly. So you have these three future titans sitting in the exact same freshman econ one class in Provo.
That's wild.
It's a pretty good argument that it's the student and not just the prestige of the school that really matters.
So true. So he's at BYU, he's studying economics, he's playing basketball, but then he just kind of disappears.
He does. He takes a gap. But it's not your typical gap year to go backpack through Europe and find himself.
Right.
From 1971 to 1973, he takes a leave to serve a full-time mission for the LDS Church in South Korea.
Now we need a quick context check here. Because South Korea in 1971 is not the South Korea of K-pop and Samsung and high-speed internet that we know today.
Oh, not at all. It was still very much a developing nation at that point. It was still recovering from the war. It was gritty.
Yeah.
And he wasn't staying in some nice expat hotel. He was living the very raw life of a missionary, knocking on doors, speaking the local language, eating the local food.
And he actually became completely fluent in Korean writing.
Right, completely fluent. And honestly, I think this specific experience is crucial for understanding his later theories.
How so?
Well, when you live in a developing economy, you see what he would later call low-end disruption in real time.
Ah, I see.
You see how people make do with much cheaper, simpler solutions because they simply can't afford the high-end stuff. He didn't have the academic vocabulary for it yet, but he was soaking in all that data.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So he comes back, he finishes up at BYU in 1975, graduating summa cum laude, naturally.
Naturally.
And then the global prestige finally catches up with him. He wins the Rhodes Scholarship.
Off to Oxford, he goes to Queen's College.
And this is where the story gets super cinematic for me, because he goes all the way to Oxford to study applied econometrics.
Which is, let's just be brutally honest here, incredibly dry.
Yeah.
It's the heavy, complex mathematics of economics.
Right, so you naturally picture him in this dusty old British library surrounded by leather-bound books, just crunching numbers all day. But that's only half the day. What is he doing the rest of the time?
He is dominating the paint. He joins the Oxford men's basketball team.
I just love the visual of this giant American kid crashing into these polite British academics on the court.
It really is a funny image. But they were incredibly serious about it. With Christensen playing as their starting center, Oxford actually won the British University Sports Federation Championship back-to-back.
1975 and 76.
Exactly.
So he's a British national champion.
Technically, yes. And in 1977, they even won the English Basketball Association's national title for non-league teams.
That is amazing.
So he's literally writing a thesis on econometrics in the morning and then winning national sports trophies in the evening.
Talk about range.
It really reinforces that idea that he had this massive capacity. He never felt like he had to trade one talent for another.
But eventually, you have to get a real job. You can't just play center for Oxford forever.
True. So he comes back to the States and he goes to Harvard Business School for his MBA.
Finally made it to Harvard.
He did. He graduates with high distinction in 1979 and immediately joins the Boston Consulting Group, BCG.
Basically the ultimate boot camp for business strategy.
Exactly. And then he does a really interesting stint as a White House fellow in 1982, working as an assistant to the U.S. Secretary of Transportation in D.C.
Getting that government perspective.
Right. So he's seeing how the federal government works at the highest level. He's seeing the bureaucracy and the logistics.
But here is the pivot point that I think is the most important part of his early career. Because up until now, he's been a consultant, a student, a government aide.
He's been an advisor.
Exactly. But in 1984, he decides he wants to be the decider. He wants to actually run something.
Right. He becomes an entrepreneur. He co-founds a company called Ceramics Process Systems Corporation, which is actually now known as CPS Technologies.
And this wasn't, just some simple software startup or a lemonade stand. This was serious, hardcore material science. MIT professors were deeply involved.
Yes, advanced ceramics, very high-tech manufacturing stuff. And Christensen served as the president and the CEO.
Okay.
And this is the part of his life that gets glossed over in the biographies sometimes, but it is so vital to understand him. It was really hard.
What made it so hard?
Well, he struggled. He had this brilliant technology, right? These advanced ceramics that could do amazing things. But he had a lot of trouble actually selling them. He faced this classic problem where the technology was great, but the market just wasn't ready, or the specific application wasn't quite right.
So he's the CEO. He's obviously brilliant. He has smart investors. He has the absolute best tech heart, and he's still just banging his head against the wall.
Exactly. And that intense frustration is the actual seed of the innovator's dilemma.
The real world data.
Yeah. He realized that all the standard business advice he learned at HBS, listen to your best customers, build better products, it just wasn't working for his startup.
Yeah.
In fact, following that very advice was almost killing his company.
So he was literally living the dilemma before he ever named it.
He really was. So he eventually left the CEO role and decided to go back to Harvard to get his doctorate.
He needed answers.
Right. He needed to figure out why. Why do smart people with good tech fail? He wasn't just sitting around theorizing. He was actively investigating his own professional scars.
That is fascinating. So he enters the DBA program at Harvard, gets his doctorate in 1992, and joins the faculty. And then, from what the sources show, his career just completely explodes.
It was a rocket ship. He achieved the rank of full professor in only 6 years.
That's fast.
That is a record at HBS. Getting tenure usually takes much, much longer. And it was all because of the groundbreaking research that eventually culminated in his 1997 book, The Innovator's Dilemma.
Okay, so we are here, the main event. The theory itself. We really need to unpack this properly for you listening, because like we said earlier, people think disruption just means, Uber came along and it was way cooler than taxis.
Which is just factually wrong. Or at the very least, it's wildly incomplete.
So teach me. Walk me through it. Let's say I'm a CEO. I'm running a very successful company. Let's say I make heavy-duty excavators, big earth-moving machines.
That is a great example. This is actually one of the exact industries he studied in depth.
Oh, perfect.
So you're the CEO of a company making massive traditional steam shovels. Your best customers are giant mining companies. They want huge buckets. They want maximum power. They want to literally move mountains.
Okay, and I give it to them. I have my engineers make the buckets bigger. I make the engines way stronger. I listen to exactly what they ask for.
And you are a fantastic manager for doing exactly that. You are practicing what Christensen called sustaining innovation.
Yep.
You are making your already good product better for your most demanding, best-paying customers. You can charge higher prices. Your profit margins go up. Wall Street absolutely loves you.
Life is good then. My stock is up. So where's the threat?
The threat is a little scrappy startup in a garage somewhere. They invent a totally new technology, let's say in this case hydraulics. But here's the catch. The early hydraulics are weak. I can't lift a mountain. They can only lift a tiny scoop of dirt. And they break down easily.
So I look at that little hydraulic shovel as a CEO, and I say, well, that's a toy. My giant mining customers can't use that thing.
And you are 100% right. Your customers do not want it. If you tried to sell that weak hydraulic shovel to them, they would laugh you out of the boardroom.
Right.
So completely rationally, you ignore it. You stick to your highly profitable steam shovels.
That makes perfect sense. Why on earth would I divert resources to invest in a worse product?
Because that little hydraulic shovel finds a totally different customer base. Maybe it's a small residential contractor, just a guy digging a ditch in a backyard.
Okay.
He can't afford your giant steam shovel, nor does he need one. But he loves the little hydraulic one. It's cheap, it's small, it gets his specific job done.
Okay, so the startup gets the backyard ditch market. I really don't care about that. That's absolute peanuts. I have the multi-million-dollar gold mines.
And this right here is the trap. Christensen called this asymmetric motivation.
Asymmetric motivation.
Yes. You, as the incumbent, are motivated to go upmarket to the big money. The startup, however, is highly motivated to capture the low end because they have nothing else.
Right.
But, and this is the absolute key mechanism of the whole theory, technology improves faster than customer needs do.
Wait, say that again? Because that feels like the big aha moment.
Technology improves faster than we actually need it to. The hydraulic engineers keep tinkering, they get better and better. Suddenly they can dig a basement, then they can dig a foundation, then they can dig a small quarry.
Wow.
And eventually, inevitably, the hydraulic shovel becomes strong enough and reliable enough to handle the gold mine.
And by the time I notice this happening,
it is way too late. The hydraulic tech is now cheaper, it's simpler, and it's completely reliable. Your big mining customers just switch over.
right.
And you are left standing there with a warehouse full of incredibly expensive, completely obsolete steam shovels.
That is wild.
And the kicker is, you didn't fail because you were stupid or lazy.
Right.
You failed because you were completely rational. You ignored the low end because it made zero business sense at the time until it literally ate your entire business.
That is genuinely terrifying if you're a market leader.
Yeah.
It basically says that the exact thing that makes you successful today is the very thing that structurally guarantees your failure tomorrow.
That is the dilemma. It's structural. It's all about the resource allocation process inside a company.
How does that work?
In a big successful company, it is very hard to justify spending real money on a tiny, low-margin product that your current best customers actively hate. The financial spreadsheet will always say no.
And Christensen saw this exact pattern everywhere, right? Hard drives, steel mills.
Oh, steel is a classic one he wrote about, the mini mills. They started by melting cheap scrap metal to make a rebar, the cheap steel rods they put in concrete.
Yeah.
The big integrated steel mills looked at that and said, rebar is a terrible low-margin business. Let them have it. We are going to retreat to high-quality, high-margin sheet steel for the auto industry.
So they just gave away the bottom of the market willingly.
They fled upmarket. But the mini mills got better. They started making angle iron. Then they moved up to structural beams. And finally, they figured out how to make high-quality sheet steel.
And the big mills.
The big mills had nowhere left to go. They had retreated right off a cliff.
It's just incredible. This theory completely turned the business world upside down. The Economist even called him the most influential management thinker of his time.
And rightfully so. It explained why these massive giants like Digital Equipment Corporation or Sears or Kodak were suddenly struggling. It wasn't incompetence at all. It was the innovator's dilemma.
But Christensen didn't just sit in his ivory tower and write papers about this.
Yeah.
He actually started companies based on the theory.
He did. He founded Innosight in the year 2000, which is a consulting firm designed to help companies see these disruptions coming before they hit.
Right.
And then he founded Rose Park Advisors in 2007, which was an investment firm that specifically used his research to invest in the disruptors.
So he was literally betting his own money on his own brain.
And winning. But what I find really fascinating about him is that he didn't just stop at widgets and steel and disk drives.
No, he went much bigger.
He looked at the world and said, this lens, this theory of disruption, it totally applies to massive social systems too.
Let's talk about that, because he made some pretty bold claims about education and healthcare in the sources we reviewed.
Definitely. He wrote a book called Disrupting Class in 2008. He looked at the whole public education system, and he argued that traditional schools are these monolithic incumbent systems. They are basically forced to teach to the middle.
Which leaves a lot of kids behind.
Exactly. And he saw online learning and computer-based learning not just as a cool new tool, but as a classic disruptive innovation.
Because it's low cost, customizable, and super accessible.
Exactly. He predicted a massive shift toward student-centric computer-based learning. He even practiced what he preached right in his own backyard.
Right.
He served on the Belmont Town Council where he lived, and he actively pushed for Belmont High School to adopt online courses so they could save money and offer a much wider variety of classes.
Oh, wow. But he also made a prediction about universities that, well, let's just say it made a lot of university deans extremely nervous.
The famous 2017 prediction.
Yeah.
He stated publicly that 50% of the roughly 4,000 colleges and universities in the U.S. would be bankrupt in 10 to 15 years.
50%. I mean, that is an absolute apocalypse for higher education.
It is a staggering number. But he looked at the traditional business model of the university, high fixed costs, tenure, fancy buildings, massive administrative bloat. And he compared it to the skyrocketing cost of tuition.
It's completely unsustainable.
That's what he saw. He believed that online degrees and specialized corporate training programs would disrupt the bottom tier of colleges first. And then that disruption would just march right up market, exactly like the hydraulic excavators did.
We are recording this deep dive in the mid-20s. We are literally entering that window, he predicted right now.
We really are. And while we haven't seen 2,000 actual bankruptcies just yet, we are definitely seeing massive mergers. We are seeing small liberal arts colleges close their doors every single month.
Yeah.
We are seeing a huge cultural questioning of the actual return on investment of a 4-year degree. So he might have been a tiny bit aggressive on the exact timeline, but the trend line looks alarmingly accurate.
It really does. And he also applied this same exact logic to healthcare right in his book, The Innovator's Prescription,
which won awards from the College of Healthcare Executives. It's the same basic pattern. General hospitals are like the big traditional department stores.
They try to do everything for everyone.
Right, but doing everything is incredibly expensive and complex. So he argued strongly for decentralization.
Like what?
Specialized clinics that do one specific thing really well and really cheap, standalone orthopedic clinics, the minute clinics you see inside the pharmacy, ultimately moving care away from the super expensive hospital and into the cheaper home environment.
It's all the exact same pattern. Move from complex and expensive to simple and affordable.
That is the ultimate Christensen signature.
Now, before we move to the final, really personal chapter of his life, we have to talk about one more huge concept. Because aside from disruption, this is probably his most famous methodology, jobs to be done.
Oh, this is my absolute favorite. It's just so incredibly human.
And we definitely can't explain this without the milkshake story. You have to tell the milkshake story for the listener.
It is such a classic. Okay, so a big fast food chain, usually thought to be McDonald's, though he often didn't name them explicitly in the case study. They wanted to sell more milkshakes.
Seems simple enough.
So they did all the traditional market research. They brought in customers, they ran focus groups, and they asked them, hey, do you want it thicker, sweeter, more chocolatey?
Standard focus group stuff. Tell us what you want.
Right. And they made the changes based on that feedback, and sales did not move at all. Total flatline.
Wow.
So they hired Christensen's firm, and one of his colleagues went and literally just stood in the restaurant for 18 hours straight. He just watched people buy milkshakes.
That is dedication. What did he actually see?
Well, he noticed this really weird pattern. A huge chunk of the milkshakes were sold before 8 in the morning to people who were totally alone.
Okay.
They bought the single shake they got in their car and they drove off.
So breakfast milkshakes.
Exactly. So the very next day, they went back and confronted these early morning buyers, and they asked this really unusual question. They asked, excuse me, what job were you trying to do that caused you to hire this milkshake?
That is such a weird way to phrase it. Why did you hire that milkshake?
It sounds crazy, but it got the real answer. It turned out these specific people had a long, boring drive to work. They needed something to keep them awake and occupied.
Right.
They weren't even really hungry yet, but they knew they would be by 10 a.m. So they needed something they could hold in one hand while driving something that wouldn't get crumbs all over their work suit, like a bagel or a donut would.
And a milkshake is perfect for that.
Yes, because the milkshake is so thick, it literally takes 20 minutes to suck it up through that thin straw.
Wow.
It was the absolute perfect tool for the job. It wasn't about the flavor at all. It was entirely about boredom alleviation and having a morning tide me over.
So the competitor to that milkshake wasn't a Burger King milkshake.
No.
The competitor was a banana or a donut or even just listening to talk radio.
Yes, exactly. And once the company actually understood the job the customers were hiring it for, they changed the product. They made the shakes even thicker so they would last longer on the commute. And they added chunks of fruit to make the whole experience more interesting.
And I assume it worked.
Sales completely exploded. The core insight is you don't just analyze the customer demographics. You have to analyze the actual job the customer is trying to get done in their life.
It just shifts the focus entirely. It's so incredibly practical.
It is. And it's that exact practicality, that deep desire to be truly useful to people that really defines the final act of his own life.
Yeah.
Because while his incredible mind was reshaping global industries, his physical body was really starting to fail him.
This is the hard part of the story. The timeline of his health in the early 2010s is just brutal.
It is relentless. In February of 2010, he is diagnosed with follicular lymphoma, which is a serious form of cancer.
Okay.
Then just 5 months later, in July of 2010, he suffers a massive ischemic stroke.
A stroke? I mean, for a professor,
Yeah.
for a guy who makes his living speaking and writing.
It was devastating. It hit the exact part of his brain that controlled speech. He developed something called expressive aphasia.
What does that mean exactly?
It means he knew exactly what he wanted to say in his head, but he physically couldn't get the right words out of his mouth. He told a story later about lying inside this MRI machine, praying, and slowly realizing that his ability to speak, the literal tool of his entire trade, was just gone.
He had to relearn English from scratch, didn't he?
Like a young child, he had to undergo intense speech therapy to learn grammar and basic vocabulary all over again. He described the feeling as trying to find a specific file in a giant file cabinet where all the labels have been completely ripped off.
The irony of that is just heartbreaking. The man who articulated some of the most complex management theories of our time suddenly reduced to complete silence.
It is. But he fought back so hard, he treated his own stroke recovery like a job to be done.
Wow.
And he did eventually regain his speech, though he sometimes struggled to find specific words for the rest of his life. And then, as if all of that wasn't enough, he later developed leukemia.
It's just wave after wave.
But right in the middle of all that suffering, the cancer, the stroke, the recovery, he writes a book that I genuinely think will outlast all of his business books. How Will You Measure Your Life?
Yeah, this
Wow.
came out in 2012.
Mm.
And it started as a speech he gave to the graduating class at Harvard Business School, right?
It did. He looked out at the students, and then he looked back at his own former HBS classmates. These were the absolute masters of the universe, right?
Right.
And he realized that many of them, by age 50, were totally miserable. They were divorced, they were estranged from their own kids.
Wow.
Some were even in federal prison. Jeffrey Skilling, the CEO of Enron, was actually in his graduating class.
Oh, man, the best and the brightest.
And Christensen asked a very simple question. How does this happen? How do these incredibly smart, highly driven people end up totally ruining their own lives?
And what was the answer?
He realized it's the innovator's dilemma all over again.
But how does disruption apply to your family life?
Think about the resource allocation process we talked about earlier. You as a person have limited resources. You have your time and your energy.
Right.
And naturally, you want to invest those resources where you get the most immediate, most tangible return.
Okay, so if I stay late at the office and I ship a big new product, I get a bonus. I get a high five from my boss. I get a promotion. The feedback loop on that is super fast.
Exactly. But if you go home early to play catch with your toddler or read them a book, what's the immediate measurable return?
Not much. The kid cries, I'm exhausted.
Right. You don't see the real result of being a good dad or a good mom for maybe 20 years.
So the margins on parenting are just really low in the short term.
So rationally, these high achievers pour all their resources into their careers. They systematically underinvest in their own families. They think, I'll deal with the family stuff later once I've made partner or once we go public. But by the time they finally turn back to their family, the family is gone.
The relationship has been disrupted by neglect. That is so profound. We basically bankrupt our own personal lives because we are constantly chasing the high-margin hits of our career.
And he also talked a lot about personal integrity in that book. He used this economic concept of marginal cost.
How so?
Well, in business, the marginal cost of doing something just one more time is usually pretty low. He applied that directly to human ethics. The cost of breaking your own moral rule just this once always seems really low in the moment.
Right, like I'll just cheat on this one little expense report.
Ugh.
Or I'll just miss this one soccer game.
Exactly. But he argued that the actual marginal cost of doing something wrong just this once is almost always infinite. Because once you break the rule is permanently gone.
Wow.
He decided very early in his life, for example, that he would never play sports on a Sunday because of his religious faith.
Well, even when he was at Oxford.
Even at Oxford.
Oh.
The big national championship game landed on a Sunday, and his coach literally begged him to play. His teammates begged him. They said, Clay, just this once. It's for the national championship.
And he was the starting center. They absolutely needed him.
He actually went to a park nearby, and he prayed about it, and he said the answer was a clear no. So he didn't play.
What happened?
They actually ended up winning without him, which he joked kept him very humble.
That's funny.
But he said later that if he had played that one time, he would have absolutely no defense the next time a conflict came up. It's so much easier to hold your principles 100% of the time than it is to hold them 98% of the time.
100% is easier than 98%. That is definitely going to stick with me.
It was the code he lived his entire life by. He was a bishop in his local church congregation. He was a counselor in a mission presidency. He was a scoutmaster for the Boy Scouts for 25 years.
Wait, 25 years?
Yes. Think about that. While he was actively advising Intel and consulting for the White House and writing bestsellers, he was spending his Tuesday nights helping 12-year-olds tie knots and plan weekend camping trips.
That is wild.
He completely refused to outsource his service to others. He deeply believed that the only real metric that God would care about at the end wasn't how much money did you make or how many books did you sell.
What was it?
It was simply how many individual people did you directly help.
That's the real measure of a life.
That's the measure. He also received the BYU Distinguished Service Award for what they called his Christ-like charity. And he left behind an incredible family. He married Christine Quinn back in 1976, and they had 5 children together.
And the sports legacy actually continued with them.
It did. His son Matthew played basketball and was actually on the Duke University team that won the 2001 national championship.
Oh, that's awesome. So Clayton Christensen passed away in January of 2020 from complications of leukemia. But just looking at the massive stack of sources we've gone through today, his footprint on the world is just staggering.
It really is. His theories are discussed in boardrooms from influential theorists of the last 50 years.
Yeah. He was ranked #1 in the Global Thinkers 50 list twice in 2011 and 2013. But honestly, I think his real legacy is that he gave us all a completely new pair of glasses.
How do you mean?
He taught us to look at business failure not as some sort of moral flaw or incompetence, but as a predictable structural mechanism. And even more importantly, he taught us that if we aren't incredibly careful, the blind pursuit of success can cost us the very things that actually make life worth living.
So true. He warned us about the disruption of massive industries, and then he warned us about the disruption of our own souls.
That is exactly it.
Well, I want to leave you, the listener, with a thought today. We talked earlier about his really aggressive prediction for universities, that half of them would go bankrupt by roughly 2027 to 2032.
Right.
We are actively watching that landscape shift right now, but I want you to try applying the jobs to be done theory to your own life this week. Look around at the things you spend your money on. Look at the big institutions you trust.
Don't ask, what is this product? Ask yourself, what exact job am I hiring this thing to do?
And if you are taking out massive loans to hire a university to just give you a network, could you maybe get that exact same network somewhere else?
Right.
Or if you are hiring a complex hospital to fix a minor ailment, could a simple phone app do it better and cheaper?
Once you start seeing the actual job, you start seeing the disruption long before it hits you.
Yeah.
And maybe, just maybe, that's how you avoid the innovator's dilemma in your own life.
Keep your eyes open.
Thanks for deep diving with us today. We'll see you next time.